Welcome back to Black News Tonight. Iowa's Governor Kim Reynolds has signed a law yesterday banning the teaching of critical race theory. Currently, there are 5 states who now have already banned, and another almost dozen states that are considering banning the teaching of critical race theory. Iowa becomes the latest to sign the ban into law. House File 802 does not mention critical race theory by name, but it bans particular concepts from being promoted or taught by teachers. As of July 1st, teachers won't be able to teach that the United States or the state of Iowa is fundamentally or systemically racist. They're also barred from race scapegoating and race stereotyping, and from creating discomfort or guilt because of one's race. Joining me now to discuss this is Charles Love. He is the Executive Director of Seeking Educational Excellence. Charles, I want to start, first of all, thank you for joining me. I want to start with 2 key terms that are banned in the new law. I quote abbreviated versions directly from House File 802. Race scapegoating means assigning fault, blame, or bias to a race and claiming they are inherently racist or inherently inclined to oppress others. Race stereotyping means ascribing character traits, values, moral and ethical codes, privileges, status, or beliefs to a race or to an individual because of their race. Help me understand this.
Wow, this is a lot to unpack. It's hard to understand it because it's um well, the people who are trying to ban and the people who are pushing kind of race-focused education, both are very, you know, really specific about crafting things in a way that is harder to drill down to. So take the quote you talked about. So banning scapegoating. Obviously, people would say, what does that mean? And through your definition, it said saying that someone's inherently racist. So the question is, do we want people teaching that a certain race, any race, is inherently racism? I would think not, but you would have to go through the whole law. Each law is crafted differently because in the news, we all hear CRT, and you talked about that earlier. And then you talked about the 1836 thing they're doing in Texas. So everybody has different labels for this stuff. So you have to take them one by one. So, in essence, is is it okay to do that piece? Yes, I'd say as far as uh, blanketly saying something about an entire race. But you mentioned something else that said something about uh, making someone feel guilty, I think it said, or something like that. Or, you
Yes.
know, yeah, now that is like, what does that even mean? I don't even know what that means. And so I don't know if you thought I was going to defend everything that's read here, but they're like grasping at straws in a sense. But I think when trying to solve any problem, you have to get to the root of the problem. So we need to discuss that when we get a chance. But I'll let you go.
So what's the root of the problem?
I think the problem is there is a lot of things that are going on in schools that are people are uncomfortable with, that are detrimental to the learning process, and some that are just flat out racist. It's too many schools, and you can give examples, but it's different everywhere you go. I asked some of the parents who I know are complaining about it to give me some of the examples of some of the things that they were complaining about that happened in their schools, and some of the things are just like, yeah, you can see why they wouldn't like it, but wouldn't be anything you'd want to ban. And some are just openly racist, like telling a 10-year-old that, because you're white, you have privilege. So you need to tell the other non-white 10-year-olds in your class about your privilege and talk about how it's different. The world is different for you. But saying that to somebody who's 10 seems a bit extreme. But on the other
Okay, so
side,
let's drill down on that example. Let me pause you there just
okay,
to drill
go.
down on that example because that's an interesting one. Um,
Yep.
do you agree that white privilege exists?
Yeah, for some, I don't. Well, here's my problem with it. I don't agree that every white person has privilege, which is what the definition means. See, that's why everything has nuance. So yes, white people have privilege, but there are other forms of privileges too. So why are we only speaking of that one? So to say that no whites have privilege is insane. But at the same time, to say white privilege means regardless of your circumstance as a white person, you have privilege, then no, I don't agree with that.
Okay, so that might so part of this is a question about whether or not we agree with the analysis, and part of it is whether or not it's appropriate to teach it in school. So let's
Right.
deal with the first part, all right? Or So if I got you to concede, just for argument's sake, that poor white people still have some level of skin privilege, that being white and poor is
Oh
still
no,
better socially than being say black and poor, would you be okay with teaching that kind of an argument in school?
depends on the grade and depends on what else you're teaching. See, the problem with everything is context and logic. So I'm glad we're going to the teaching point. So a lot of things we'll hear when you hear CRT is that the people who are against it are misrepresenting what it is. And I really don't care what the label is. Let's drill down to what you're actually doing. So it's hard to really nail it down because what a lot of people will say is all we're trying to teach, and you mentioned this earlier in another segment, which I agree with, is what you said truth, right? You said teach truth. I think it's when you were talking about Texas. So there's nothing wrong with teaching truth. And some terrible things happened to blacks, and there was some racism in the country for a long period of time. Should that be taught? Yes. So if that's the argument, then that's yes. But that's not where it ends. So everything has to be taught with context. So you should teach all the bad things that happened to blacks, where it came from, the good things that happened to blacks and other groups. But the question to that would be, how much time is in the school day? Because we're not extending the school day and we're not going to carry the school further into the year, into the summer, because the teachers unions wouldn't allow that. So this is a finite amount of time we have to teach. We all know, because I'm about solutions. We know that in certain, precincts in Chicago, in Atlanta, where they had a scandal, in Baltimore, where our kids in black communities are failing at a higher rate. So there's things that we can do, practical things we can do to improve that. But I don't believe that spending more time on this thing, unless we're going to make the whole school day history, is going to be beneficial to them in the long run.
So that's another important point you take us to, right? Which is who's asking for that, right? Because that can become somewhat of a straw man, right? We can't spend our whole day talking about race. We can't spend our whole day talking about history. Sure, I think everyone would agree with that. But there's a bunch of initiatives, a bunch of laws being passed around the country banning the teaching of this when I don't know of any districts that are proposing to do that thing.
Well, no, I mean, no, I was using that as an example. I was just saying that there's a limited amount of time. I'm not saying anyone's proposing to teach only history the whole day, but we do agree that the
No, no, no.
school
I know.
day is a
I'm not.
certain
I'm not.
length.
I'm not pushing back against your point in particular. I'm saying in general,
Right.
the whole argument of going around the country, all these laws and all these states that are saying we're
Banning.
banning CRT in school. No, no, no. Nobody's trying to teach CRT. I don't know where these
Right.
curriculum
Right. No, no, you're
proposals are
100%
to
right.
teach it.
Right. That's the
Yeah.
argument
So
I
it
have.
seems like a
It's the
solution.
labeling though. But it's also the labeling. So you're banning CRT, and there is no CRT course. You're right. But what there is in the school, there is classwork or assignments being given that says, well, like you say, now you and I can disagree on it. That's fine. Whether all white people have this privilege. So it seems like you're saying they do. I don't think they all have it. Let's assume, like you say, giving you the argument, they all have it. But what you're saying is, if there's an assignment for someone who's, say, 9 years old, and the assignment is white people all have this privilege and it's permeated this way for all white people. Well, you and I will agree that even if we don't agree that all white people have that privilege, that it's not all permeated the same way. They don't all use it the same way. They're not all using it to hurt blacks intentionally. Some are. So if you only teach it that way and there's no context to it, that is a problem. I've had it happen with my kid, and he's only 5. They said that they were going to start teaching STEM, I'm sorry, in kindergarten. I'm like, that's great. They've never introduced that young. And so the assignment was that women were traditionally marginalized in STEM. So we're going to highlight women in science. That was the first assignment. The second assignment was about empathy and how this woman who was a coder at Google was the only woman coder, and how that made her feel being the only woman. And so my point in that is, and this is not extreme, of course, but they're 5. So you're not actually teaching them STEM is one point. But the other problem is what we always see happen, you will attest to this, that whenever something goes to focus on improving something for black and it becomes mainstream, it becomes more than just black. So it becomes the minority thing, or it becomes the LGBT thing, or it becomes the whatever else thing. So then it doesn't help
Intersectional.
black, but it becomes
It
not for
becomes
black.
intersectional. Well, it
Yeah, it
becomes
doesn't become
intersectional,
black.
which is one of the tenets of critical race theory. I have to run, but let me ask you just one quick question. I'm just fascinated by something that you said. You said that all white people don't have privilege. What's the basis of that? of that claim.
Well, what is the basis that they all have privilege? What is it that they can all do that you and I
Well,
can't do?
so I'm happy to answer that. But first, what was the basis of you making the claim?
That they don't all have privilege? Because I don't think they all have privilege. You want me to prove a negative?
And
What are you saying? You'd have to prove to me that they all have privilege.
so if would you agree with the empirical data that shows that even when we control for class and geography, that white people still get different outcomes in jobs, they get different outcomes in school, they get different outcomes in criminal justice, they get different outcomes in healthcare. I'm sure you've seen this data. Would you agree? Do you agree with that data, or do you disagree with it?
Yeah, but it's not universal. I could give you data that's the same for other groups, right? So you're saying that there's no black person that got a job or a benefit because they were black, or no Muslim who got one because they were Muslim? So some of the white may be racism, but some of the white benefits might be nepotism, right? I'm helping my friend's son, or my cousin or my nephew, and then some black or Hispanic person may do the same thing.
Right.
What the
So
white privilege
for you,
implies is that it's
so
solely skin only. So you're implying that it's solely skin. So
no,
any white person that gets a benefit is only
no.
white,
So
right?
the argument is that white people have a systematic advantage, and that there are systems in place that benefit people with white skin privilege, and that those things, whether it's beauty
No, I
standards,
don't
whether
believe
it's
that.
access to capital, whether it's social mobility. Okay, that's fair. I'm gonna have you back so we can have that conversation. But Charles, thank you so much for hanging out with me
And you should come
today,
on my
so we
show.
can wrestle. We wrestle. Oh, I'd love to. I'd love to. Everybody, hit us up. Let us know what you're thinking. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We're at BNC News. Also, we have the website, bnc.tv.